Okay, I'm gonna open a new window and then we will get going. Really sorry, I don't know, something, it crashed part of Chrome for me. Okay, well, I'll have to get to know you guys through the question and answer period a little bit better. Let's move on. So regarding questions, please, if you have some urgent questions along the way, feel free to put them in the chat window and Tim will interrupt me and ask them if you have anything that's not clear and you want clarified. Otherwise, just put in your questions as they occur to you, and we'll have some question and answer periods in which we'll address those questions. Okay, so these are all the topics we're gonna talk through today. We should definitely get through all the topics today. And then we actually have a little bonus round at the end where you get to choose which of 3 topics, sort of bonus topics, we will cover. So the topics are the problems with and the potential of data. What is DataViz and why is it important? What are the key elements of effective data visualizations? How do you choose a chart that's correct for your data and purpose? We'll talk about some data visualization tool options that you have, including many free ones. We'll do a somewhat shortened DataViz in action, a demonstration of how you visualize data in a program called Tableau. And then I'll talk about some resources you can use to continue your data visualization journey. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have some bonus rounds. Okay, so topic number 1, the problems with and the potential of data. So let's talk about why you don't use data, or probably more correctly, why you don't use it as well as you might. I found there's at least 6 common reasons why organizations don't make better use of data. And the thing about that they all have in common is that they're really understandable. The first is data naivete or aversion. So nonprofit staff tend to, of course, have expertise in the environment, the arts, health, education, but not data analysis, right? Some might actually have a downright data aversion. They'll admit or even maybe proudly proclaim that they're not a numbers person. So that's one reason that we sort of shy away from data. Another reason is the time crunch, right? This is why we don't do a lot of things that we would like to do. We're struggling to stay afloat, to submit the next proposal, to maintain programming, of course, address the huge and varied needs of our clientele, cultivate new donors, but digging through data is on the back burner. Fear is another reason we don't use data well. Some understandably worry what their data will show. Nonprofit staff may fear that they won't be able to control the story, or that the data will be taken out of context, that they'll be compared to other organizations that aren't really comparable. They fear that funders will actually withdraw funding based on data, no matter how much the funder might talk about continuous quality improvement and such. Dirty data. I don't know if you've heard of this term. Some nonprofit staff have low-level staff members entering data into management information systems or spreadsheets. Others have multiple staff members entering data, and each person's entering the data slightly differently. And the result can be what's called dirty data. That's just data that is inaccurate because it hasn't been entered in a consistent way. So for example, if a participant is entered twice into a database, perhaps a participant named Michael Smith shows up at your organization, he gets entered into your database, drops out a few months later, and then comes back again for another program and is entered again into the database as Michael B. Smith. You can see that's dirty data, right? Because it, as far as the data is concerned, that's 2 different people. So it's going to be really hard to track his progress through the organization. Wrong data. Many nonprofits have data on their participants and financials, but they often lack data to show their impact. For example, a tutoring program may not have their participants' school grades or test scores because that's hard to get out of school districts. An employment program may not have data on former participants' wages over time because that's also data that's hard to get. Some outcomes are really hard to quantify and may require surveys of participants. Organizations often lack the time and funds to collect data from participants. And finally, disconnected data. So rather than having a central management information system, smaller nonprofits may store their data on separate Excel or Google spreadsheets. So Michael Smith's demographics might be on one sheet and his attendance in various programs on other sheets. And this makes analysis of the relationship of, say, age to program participation impossible, right? Because those data points are in two different data sources. Okay, so we just talked about the reasons you don't use data well. But data is one of two superpowers that organizations have, which I'm going to discuss today. So many organizations have lots of data packed away in databases and spreadsheets that they do not put to good use. But data is the way we know if what we're doing is worthwhile. We can think of it as a tool. We don't invest in other tools, say computers, and then just store them away and rarely use them. But that's often what we do with data, right? We're always entering in data, but we're not making good use of it on the other end. Even really small organizations collect data on many things. Here is a sample of the types of data that many nonprofits collect, not just participation in programs, but donations, events, web traffic, social media. We have data, most of us have data on all those things. Okay, so this is my little commercial or public service announcement about data. Now, I understand that you may feel that data doesn't really need a commercial. It's already way overhyped, right? We hear and talk about data all the time. We hear about evidence-based practices and data-driven solutions and key performance indicators. But in all the hype around data, I think we often lose sight of what its core importance is. So that's why I offer you this little commercial. So data is important because of how our perception works. What we perceive is based not just on what we actually observe, what we might call data, but also on what we expect to observe. So this is how it works. The brain evaluates which of a variety of probable events are actually occurring. And what we perceive is based in part on what decision the brain makes. So sure, what we perceive is also based on incoming signals from the outside world, what we might call data. But there are far more signals coming from within the brain that affect our perception. And so this is really pretty important to understand. And there's a great example of this. There was a YouTube video that went viral several years ago. I'm not going to show it to you because I bet a lot of you have already seen it. And if you're like me, you saw it as part of a presentation and the presenter gets up and says, I'm about to show you a 2-minute video. You're going to see a bunch of people passing a basketball amongst themselves. And your job is to count how many times the basketball gets passed. So if you're like me, you dutifully watched the video, you counted the number of passes, and then the presenter gets back on and says, raise your hand if you saw a guy in a gorilla suit walk through the frame. And if you're like me, you did not see a guy in a gorilla suit because you did not expect to see him. And sure enough, the presenter shows the video again. It's very apparent there's a guy in a gorilla suit. So these inner brain signals or expectations can really distort our understanding of a situation. Thus, the incoming signals or data are quite important to confirming or negating our expectations. But we have to pay attention to data to make that happen. Progress in organizations and indeed in all of human history often starts with the concession that our expectations might be wrong and that data might have something to teach us. Of course, if you remember the scientific method back in seventh grade, it's meant to prime us to focus on data rather than expectations. We have to formulate a hypothesis and then use data from the outside world to see if the hypothesis holds up. Okay, commercial over, but I do want to do a little disclaimer, which is that data may be part of the answer, but it's certainly not the whole answer. Love might be the whole answer, who knows? But indeed, data is more about questions than it is about answers. It can show us what questions we should be asking and help us to refine those questions. It can also point us in the general right direction, but you are never going to have perfect or comprehensive data. Data will never take you all the way to your answer. Also, of course, we should be wary of data as well, although not fearful, but some wary of data. We should always ask, where's this data coming from? Is the source likely to be biased? If it's drawn from a sample, is the sample representative of the larger group it's supposed to represent? What's missing from the data? Are certain groups of people or time periods missing from the data? Are some survey respondents, for example, hard to reach? Do they lack trust in the data collector? We really need to understand where the data is coming from. Okay, topic number 2, what is DataViz and why is it important? So now let's talk about your second superpower, which is your visual acuity. And let's test your visual superpowers. Which image of the 2 that you're looking at do you comprehend first, the Mona Lisa or the spreadsheet? Okay, you do not have to put your answers in the chat window, because I'm going to just take a wild guess that you understand the Mona Lisa more quickly. And that's because our visual system has evolved over millions of years to process images essentially in parallel. So what do I mean by that? We don't read the Mona Lisa from top to bottom and from left to right. We take it all in together and understand almost instantly that this is a picture of a woman in front of a landscape with a strange smile. Words and numbers, which only appeared within the last few thousand years, require us to scan individual characters one at a time, recognize them, and piece them together into words or values, and then sentences and equations. And while all types of sensory signals barrage the brain is specially geared for visual signals, and indeed uses half of its volume for visual analysis. And that's because for a long time during human history, our survival really depended on it. We had to detect danger at a distance, such as lions lying in the tall grass. And we had to do that using our visual systems. We had to use cues such as color, shape, and size to see those things. So when we use visual cues, again, like length, color, and size, we transfer much of the work that is needed to decode data from the slower conscious, energy-intensive parts of the brain to the faster parts of the brain that require less energy, which results in more efficient cognition. Data visualizations such as charts, maps, and graphs use these visual cues to communicate data and thus greatly speeds up our processing of data, and so addresses in part that time crunch I talked about. DataViz is also a quick way to assess how dirty, disconnected, or irrelevant our data is. If the picture doesn't look right or complete, then we may need to do something to improve our data. So let's test our visual super processing powers again. So I want you to take a very quick look at this array of numbers and tell me how many 9s do you see? Okay, I'm really only going to give you a few seconds, because if I show you the exact same array, but I use color coding, it's way easier, right? Our brains are really geared to pick out color. So we can see easily that there's 4 9s. Okay, here's another quick test. I'd like you to try to answer these 3 questions using the very simple spreadsheet you see above. Were foundation or corporate grants consistently higher over time? And how did foundation grants trend over time, as well as how did corporate grants trend over time? Okay, again, 2 more seconds, because if I show you the exact same data, using a graph, it's much easier, right, to understand. We can see right away the corporate grants were consistently higher than foundation grants. That foundation grants were pretty flat over time, except for that spike in May. And then we can even see a pretty complex pattern among of the corporate grants over time, sort of an up, up, down pattern across each quarter. That would be particularly difficult to detect looking at a spreadsheet. Okay, so not only is data displayed visually easier to process, it actually appears to have more impact. So a June 2018 Washington Post article described a series of experiments in which data displayed in charts significantly reduced the misperceptions of subjects, both liberal and conservative, on important political issues. So the chart you're looking at shows the results of just one of those experiments. In this experiment, Republican respondents were asked whether they believed that average global temperatures were increasing, decreasing, or about staying the same over time, over the past about 30 years. Respondents were divided into 3 groups. There was a control group, which are represented by the orange bars on this chart. And this control group got no information at all. They were just asked that question about global temperatures, and then they answered it. Another group, represented by the gray bars, got a textual summary of the scientific consensus on global temperatures. And then the third group, represented by the blue group, got a chart showing temperature change since 1940 as measured by 4 climate institutions. And as you can see, the people who saw the chart, again, those represented by the blue bars, were the least likely to draw the wrong conclusion about global temperature change. And strangely enough, the textual information actually made the perception problem worse for Republicans who strongly identified with the GOP. But the chart really helped to correct that misperception for both types of Republicans, as represented in this chart. And the results were just the same with Democrats. When they were presented with political issues that they might have misperceptions about, charts really helped to correct those misperceptions. Okay, so here are some challenges that most organizations face. Of course, showing need for your services, perhaps to current or prospective donors and funders, distinguishing your services from that of other organizations, showing your uniqueness, showing your impact, of course, of what you do, and evaluating your progress over time and showing that progress to other stakeholders. So let's consider how to visualize data to address each of these needs. One way organizations use data is to make the case for the need for their services. Here's an example from over 200 years ago. In the 1800s, Florence Nightingale worked with a statistician named William Farr and analyzed army mortality rates during the Crimean War in Great Britain. They discovered that most of the soldiers hadn't died in combat, but rather from preventable diseases caused by bad hygiene. So Nightingale decided to make her case with pictures rather than tables of numbers or prose. In her words, to affect through the eyes what we failed to convey to the public through their word-proof ears, unquote. So her invention was the polar area chart. That's what you're looking at. And as you can see, it's sort of a variant of the pie chart. Each slice of the pie showed deaths for 1 month of the war, growing larger if the deaths increased, and color-coded to show the causes of death. So the blue portions of each slice show the proportion that were due to preventable causes like poor hygiene. The red portions represent deaths due to wounds in battle, and the black represent deaths due to other causes. The Queen and Parliament could see at a glance the importance of hygiene. They quickly set up a sanitary commission to improve conditions, and indeed death rates fell. Nightingale became one of the first people to successfully use data visualization for persuasion, and to influence public policy. Another way to show need is to use an icon chart like this. You can show the prevalence of a problem using icons. As you can see, this chart also uses color, and it really may make more intuitive sense than a bar chart because we're talking about people and we're showing representations of people. It's not a type of visualization you would want to overuse. You wouldn't want to have a whole bunch of these together in a presentation and a report, but it can be quite powerful. Okay, so here's a quadrants chart. This is what I was gonna visualize the information you provided on that survey in a quadrants chart, but technology was not my friend. So a quadrants chart shows the relationship between two key measures and can be another great way to show exactly where the need is. So I created this chart for a client of mine who was working with a number of school districts to implement what they call deeper learning strategies. And the first thing they did when they started their work was to survey principals and teachers at the schools involved in the project and ask them questions to ascertain how important each of these deeper learning strategies were to them already and how often they already put these strategies into practice. And this chart shows the overall results for all the principals and teachers who completed the survey. Each dot represents one of the deeper learning strategies, and each dot is positioned to show the average importance assigned to the strategy and the average frequency of practice of that strategy. So the consultants could see at a glance that although the teachers and principals already felt that their strategies were really important, you can see they're all over to the right, so they're pretty high on the importance scale. That they were putting them into practice less than 50% of the time, because they're on the bottom there. They're in the right bottom quadrant. So they could see that the need really wasn't addressing the obstacles that were preventing the educators from doing what they already believed was really important. Okay, another way to show need is to do a strategy called putting the viewers in the viz. And Sarita really made me think of this when she was talked about the importance of relatability. Well, there's plenty of information that the data that we most pay attention to is data about ourselves, when we see sort of ourselves in the visualization, or in the case study, for example, testimonial that she was talking about. So this is a cool way to put the viewer in the viz. This is actually interactive visualization, but you're looking at just a static version of it. So as you can see, the viewers asked, what % of Black non-Hispanic children experienced poverty in 2019? And there's a little slider tool where they can put in their answer, which shows up as a percentage. And then you're supposed to scroll down at the bottom. It says, how did you do? Hover your mouse here to see. And when you do, you see just a simple chart like this, which tells you what the data actually shows, which is that the percentage is over 25%, what others guessed and what you guessed. So you can see, sort of how off the mark you are and how you relate to other respondents. It's a great way to engage people in statistics that they might otherwise sort of glass over when hearing. Nothing's more effective really than a bar chart. It may seem tired, but we all know how to read bar charts already. So the cognitive load is really low. So if you want to show efficacy, here's a great way, right? We can see right away that this organization started reaching their goal around March and exceeded it in April. Here's another way of showing efficacy. This makes an even stronger point by allowing a comparison of the trajectory for one group that got an intervention with another group that didn't. So we can see at the point of the intervention, the two groups really started to diverge, and group A did much better. Still talking about efficacy, this visualization uses a number of techniques. The type of chart is called a stacked area chart, and it's also using a technique called small multiples, where you put a bunch of small charts next to each other to allow for more easy comparison. So, and it uses a great technique, which rather than using percentages, it uses 100 people. Our brains seem to work better when we're talking about 100 people than when we're using percentages, but it's really the same thing, right? So, and the notations here are really helpful too. So we can quickly see that poverty and child mortality have decreased dramatically over the past 2 centuries, and that other things like basic education, literacy, democracy, and vaccination have all dramatically increased over the same time period. Here's kind of a cool chart. I don't even know what it's called, but it's a great way to show uniqueness. So this chart shows a comparison of female and male students on advanced placement tests they take, the percentage of students who are male or female who take each type of test. If you read it from bottom to top, you can see it's about the same percentage of test takers who take Latin and statistics. But as you move up into languages and the arts, there are many more female test takers for those tests. This type of chart is called a tree map. Don't ask me why, because it doesn't look anything like a tree. But it's really a very intuitive type of chart, and we can see right away that this one organization called Youth Together served more clients than all the other organizations combined. Okay, let's talk about evaluation and planning. I suspect a lot of you have heard of logic models. They get a lot of play in proposals. They're really just another word for a flow chart. It's sort of the theory behind why a program is supposed to work. It gives you inputs and then intermediate outputs and then outcomes. So if we do these types of programs, we expect to get these intermediate outcomes and then these final outcomes in our program. Again, my experience is that they get a lot of play in proposals, but then often collect dust. But this is what I call a living logic model, because it's an interactive logic model. I'm showing you just a snapshot of it, but the real one is interactive because it's a living logic model because it's plugged into real-time data. It shows progress to date using color. So that flow chart at the top, the darker colors show where there's been more progress in this tutoring program. The lighter colors show where there is less progress. And when you click on any one of those squares, you get more data at the bottom, sort of disaggregated data on how individual students are doing in the program. You can also scroll over components to learn more about different aspects of the program. This information can include images and web links. So this kind of gets at a little bit of some of the stuff Sarita was talking about, and it's a huge concern of mine, is how do you get real people into these visualizations? Of course, by nature, charts, maps, and graphs are abstractions, but what they're trying to communicate is information about real people's lives. So this provides a way, if you were inserting actual photographs in here, to really make the point that this is real people we're talking about. These are not data points. Okay, so what are some key elements of effective visualizations? I'm going to give you 10 DataViz suggestments. Of course, they're not commandments because they don't always apply, but in my experience, if you follow these just sort of 10 suggestions, you'll always be able to turn a good visualization into a great one. Okay, number one is to clean data first. We talked about dirty data a little bit, and this one may seem obvious, but take a look at the data before you visualize it. Look for data that's missing, that's duplicated, look for any formatting issues, for example, with dates. Everything rides on the quality of your data, so don't skip this step. There are various tools out there that will help you clean your data. There's data validation features in Excel and in Google Sheets. I'm going to be talking about Tableau later on in the presentation. They have a tool called Tableau Prep. There's also a free online tool called Open Refine that you can use with what's called data transformation, which includes cleaning data. Okay, encode thoughtfully. What do I mean by that? So when you encode data, it means that you're transferring it from words and numbers into some kind of visual format, color, shape, size, those types of things. Researchers Cleveland and McGill, as well as some others, have studied what types of encodings people are able to decode most accurately and rank them in the following list. So as you can see, we're only able to make pretty generic comparisons among color, hues, and intensity. So, right, so if you show me like 2 shades of green, I'd be hard pressed to say one is twice as dark as the other. But I could say one is darker than the other. I just can't tell you if it's twice as dark. But if you showed me 2 lines along a common scale, that looking at the other end of the spectrum, I could pretty confidently say, oh yeah, that line is about twice as long as the other line. So when we want our viewers to make really accurate comparison, we're going to want to use things like a bar chart that uses encodings like position along a common scale. But when we're okay with just generic comparisons, we can use things like color and area and angle. Okay, so pies are delicious, but often inscrutable when applied to data. So looking at this image, we are looking at a bar chart and a pie chart showing you the exact same data. But look at them, right? So we can confidently proclaim that the E bar is the tallest, right, in the bar chart. But we'd be hard pressed to pick out which pie slice is largest. I don't know about you, but E, D, and C look pretty similar in size. And that's because we don't do so good assessing angles. So when comparing the quantities of several things, bar charts are almost always better than pie charts. The only exception is when you want to compare a part to a whole. But once you get beyond 2 or maybe 3 slices, skip the pie and dust off the trusty bar chart. Okay, highlight what's important. Once you've visualized your data, the story can still remain hidden, particularly to those unfamiliar with the data or subject matter. So that's when it's time to call out data points with color and annotations. So to lead your viewer through the visualization with those, with highlighting certain parts of the chart. Here is some CDC data on chronic illness, which shows an example of highlighting what's important. So this type of chart is called a parallel coordinates graph. It shows the level or amount of something across several dimensions. So I don't know if you can see, but there's different kinds of diseases along the x-axis here. So what we're looking at is the percentage of adults with chronic illnesses across states in the United States. Each line represents a different state. And notations in color are used to draw your attention to how low residents of Hawaii are in relation to other states on rates of depression, particularly in relationship to Oregon, which is highest on rates of depression. Okay, show ordered. So ordered data should be shown in a way that our perceptual system intrinsically senses them as ordered, but conversely, unordered data should not be shown in a way that implies an ordering that doesn't exist. So let's look at this. The 3 charts on top are showing the exact same data as the 3 charts on bottom. There's really only one difference. What you're looking at is the percent of health visits that included depression screening across different care teams. So you can see there's family medicine, pediatrics, and women's health. Those bar charts at the top are not ordered in any way, but the bar charts in the bottom are ordered in descending order. So you could right away pick out the teams that are meeting the goal for depression screening and which ones are falling way below the goal. Okay, clarify with color. So this might be the the suggestment that's broken the most. Don't use the same color for two different variables that in charts that are side by side. Don't use the same color saturation for different magnitudes of the same data category. Don't use too many encodings on one dashboard. And bright, fully saturated color is sort of like yelling. You don't want to yell all the time. People think you're crazy and stop listening, right? So moderate your color as you might moderate your voice. Only yell when you have a really important point to make, and then provide all the other information in soft, less saturated colors to provide contrast. Let's look at an example. Okay, so this is probably like the worst data dashboard ever created. It breaks all the color rules. Of course, it's using the same color to mean different things in side-by-side charts. It's using lots of bright, fully saturated color. It's using way too many different shades or different colors. So it kind of gives you a headache just looking at it. And it's certainly bewildering. So if these two charts look the same to anyone, it may mean that you have red-green color blindness. Indeed, 7 to 10% of men are red-green colorblind. Just fun fact, it's a much lower prevalence in women because this trait actually exists on the X chromosome, and the chances of having it on both your X chromosomes if you're a woman is very low. But we should really, pay attention to this and not put red and green near each other, because people with red-green color blindness are going to have trouble distinguishing them. These maps show that CDC chronic illness data, and it uses something called a diverging color palette to emphasize contrast. So the blue shades show where there are high ranks or people where there are less chronic illness issues. And the orange shades show where there are greater chronic illness issues. And so darker blue, or states in darkest blue, are the healthiest states. Those in the darkest red are the least healthy states, and those in gray are somewhere in the middle. That's what's called a diverging color palette. So it makes it really easy, for example, to pick out things like the corridor of poor health in the southeast that we see on this map. If you've read anything by Edward Tufte, who's sort of the grandfather of modern data visualization, you may have heard about the data to ink ratio, which he says should be as close to 1 as possible. Today, we'd probably think more about the data to pixel ratio, but it's a really good thing to keep in mind. It's all about eliminating non-data ink or non-data pixels to help a visualization look more clean and to focus attention on the key data points by eliminating distracting visual elements. So here again are two charts showing the exact same data, but in the chart on the bottom, I've removed a lot of distracting visual elements. So you can see I've removed the grid lines, I've removed those data labels, those little numbers, and replaced, I also removed the color legend at the top and just labeled the lines directly on the chart on the bottom. So with fewer distractions, the viewer can more easily compare those two trends, which is all I really want them to do. No unjustified 3D. So this suggestment comes from Tamara Munzer, the University of British Columbia. You know those 3D charts that you can make in Excel. Well, Munzer cautions us not to use those 3D representations of data because they can really confuse the viewer. Let's talk about why. So foreshortening is a drawing technique in which you reduce or distort in order to convey the illusion of three-dimensional space. So parts that are supposed to be perceived as closer in space are made larger. So we're looking at two pie charts. They're showing again the same data, but the three-dimensional one, the red slice is made larger to make it look three-dimensional. And as you can see, it really distorts the angle and makes the red slice look larger. But when we look at the two-dimensional one, we could see that those slices are all exactly the same in size. So it's important to not misrepresent your data by using those 3D charts. To create the illusion of 3 dimensions, another technique is to obscure some objects with others to make it appear that some objects are in front of one another. But of course, this is a problem for accurate assessment and data visualization as well. So in the top chart, the green bars are really barely visible. But rather than have that third axis, you can use color, shape, or size to encode a third variable, which is what they've done on this chart too. It's already colored something different, right? The C group is already colored in green. So that third axis is really completely unnecessary and only serves to make the chart more difficult to read. It's much easier to compare the lengths of those green bars in the chart on the bottom. Okay, eyes beat memory. This one also comes from Tamara Munzer. And it just means it's easy to compare charts that are placed side by side than to compare a chart that you're looking at to one that you saw a few seconds ago. So this is a great small, again, another small multiples chart. This one's by Doug McCune, who also has a wonderful blog. And it shows the power of eyes over memory. So these are small charts, are all laid out together to make it easy for your eyes to scan across charts and making comparisons. So what we're looking at is crime data. So each little chart represents the prevalence of crimes at different times of day. The yellow bars on top show daytime crimes, the prevalence of daytime crimes, and the blue bars on bottom show the prevalence of evening crimes. And we can see right away that, for example, driving under the influence and drunkenness occur more often during the night, and that suicide and trespassing occur more often during the day. Making those comparisons would be really hard if you were watching, you were looking at charts, you know, kind of flipping through a slideshow or a report. But when they're placed side by side, you can make a lot of interesting discoveries. When showing a series of visualizations, we should always start with the most general and then zoom into the particulars. So that CDC data, you've already seen 2 of these charts. That was a series of 3 charts that I created using, again, that CDC chronic illness data. The maps give you a general sense of where there are health concerns according to the data set, such as that corridor of poor health in the Southeast. The parallel coordinates chart helps to compare states on specific illnesses and conditions. And the last dashboard, which you haven't seen, gives the viewer the ability to dive deeper into trends and possible predictors of good and poor health. Okay, my last DataViz suggestment is that Viz is not always the right solution. There are at least 2 cases in which it's probably better to use a table or spreadsheet than it is to use a chart, map, or graph. The one is when you already have an engaged but highly diverse audience, diverse in terms of their interests. So these folks may be highly motivated to access certain information, you know, sort of there's certain columns that in your table that are of interest to them, and they won't be annoyed by having to find the data on a table, but they're also diverse in their interests. Tables make really good use of paper or screen real estate. You can fit a lot of rows and columns into a small space, allowing users with different interests to find the data in a single table. Another case in which you might want to use a table instead of a chart is when you have many units of measure. So for example, you want to show the height, weight, location, and satisfaction level of 100 participants in a healthy eating program. So this data involves 4 different units of measure, right? Inches, pounds, latitude, longitude, and survey ratings. So under those conditions, which really make for a complex chart, it may be really difficult to, find encodings for each one of those things, and it would be better just to go with a simple table. Okay, how to choose a chart for your data and purpose. I'm going to show you some good resources to use in choosing a chart. Don't feel like you need to take notes here. These are in the handout that Tim has provided to you. The Data Visualization Catalog is an online resource and is a great place to look up various chart types and see what each are good for. I also highly recommend Andrew Abella's Simple Decision Tree. This is what you're looking at, called Chart Suggestions, a Thought Starter. You can find it online, but it's also in the handout that you're going to get or that you already got. It's based on Gene Zelazny's classic work called Saying It with Charts. And the decision tree, as you can see, starts in the middle with this basic question: what do you want to show? And then it provides 4 options. One is comparison. So in this case, you have 2 or more groups of things or people, and you want to see which of these groups is largest or smallest, highest or lowest on something. And you also may want to see how these groups compare on a measure over time. So if you want to show comparison, you kind of follow along this branch of the decision tree, and it leads you through some questions, and then you arrive at a chart type. You may also want to show distribution. So in this, what he means by distribution is you have a bunch of data points, say the ages of participants in a program or the test scores of students in a class, and you want to know how spread out or bunched up they are. Are most of the students, doing really well and are at the high end, or are most of them doing really poorly and they're at the low end? So if you want to show the sort of distribution, or are they really spread out, you follow that branch of the decision tree. Composition. So you want to understand who or what makes up a larger group, such as how many participants in a program are in different age brackets, or how many have been in the program for different lengths of time. Then you follow that composition branch. And finally, relationships. So you want to know if one thing is related to another, either at one point in time or over time. So does more participation in a mental health program correlate with less distress over time? Do those with lower incomes have higher heart rates? So that type of relationship. This is a decision tree from Flowing Data, which is also a wonderful DataViz blog, and focuses on the type of data you have and then recommends a chart. So there are 4 primary types of data. There's categorical data. So that's data that have 2 or more categories, but which do not have an intrinsic order to them. So for example, a real estate agent could classify their types of property into distinct categories, such as houses, condos, co-ops, and bungalows. Ordered data is data that has 2 or more categories, but the categories can be put in orders or ranks. So if you ask someone if they like the policies of the Democratic Party, and they could answer not very much, or they're okay, or yes, I like them a lot, then you have ordinal data, because they can be put in order, but they are not like dollar amounts that you can add together. You can't say one is twice as big as another, for example. And then finally, you have continuous data, which is an example would be dollar amounts. Because you can look at the difference, that the difference between $30 and $40 is $10. And so that is what we call continuous data. So this chart asks you what kind of data you have, and then suggests charts based on that. And finally, this one is from Stephanie Evergreen, who's a DataViz guru, who is also worth knowing, and is focused on common purposes you might have for a visualization, such as showing survey responses or showing change over time. And really, there are a lot of other decision trees out there if you just Google this. These are some of my favorites. And again, then these will be in your handout, and you can use them to choose a chart next time you need to make a chart. Okay, DataViz tool options. Okay, so let's talk about your options for creating data visualization. Two primary tool types are spreadsheets like Excel and programs specifically designed for data visualization like Tableau. We're going to just use Excel and Tableau as examples, but there's a lot of programs out there that are like each of them. So spreadsheet tools are electronic worksheets, of course, that display data in tabular form, meaning just a table of columns and rows. Each data point is stored in cells and can be manipulated by manually set formulas. Graphs, charts, and charts can be created afterward to highlight a particular insight. But you usually have to have an idea of what you want to show before building the chart. Data visualization tools such as Tableau format data in a pictorial or graphical view to easily spot patterns, trends, and correlations between data points. These tools typically connect to third-party tools to pull data and have user-friendly functionality like drag and drop tools and menus, so users can explore data freely. Programs like Tableau allow you to explore data without knowing the answer ahead of time, and they include drill down and data blending features that make it possible to spot correlations and trends, and then dig down to understand what caused them to happen. So Tableau can be connected also to live data, and so can update automatically as the data updates, which can be sort of cumbersome in programs like Excel. You're going to get this list again in your handout, but here are some free DataViz programs that you might want to check out. We're going to be using Tableau Public in the demonstration today, so you'll get a bit of sense of how that works, but you might want to check out these other ones as well. For a more comprehensive list of data visualization tools, I would suggest this catalog. Again, this is in your handout, where you can find almost any data visualization tool in this catalog. Of course, they're not all free, but they're good for various purposes. Okay, I have talked a lot. Let's take a break. And feel free to also use this time to take a quick break yourself if you need to go to the restroom or get something to drink. We'll resume in 5 minutes, but I'll hang out here in case anyone has any questions. Tim, is there any question? Are there any questions right now?
I don't see any questions right now. Does anybody have any questions? Please raise your hand and we can put you on audio, or you can post your questions in the chat or in the Q&A. I'd love to hear your thoughts about how relevant this is to your organization going so far.
I'm going to put up my next slides while we're waiting.
Yeah, let me put this up too. I forgot to do this in the beginning, but here's just a quick poll about what is the focus area or areas for your organization, and you can check all the ones that apply there. And I'm sure we might have left one or two off. And I also forgot to say, up at the top, there's a view button, and the top right corner of the presentation, so you could change your view as we're going along. So if you can't see it, if you want to get a better view, you can click on the view on there. So Amelia, Adrienne asked, I've tried to use Tableau. Do you offer or recommend modules to learn how to best utilize it? Or is that
Yes.
upcoming?
Yeah, that's coming up. So good. You anticipated one of my slides. So just stay tuned.
Great. Sarah says this is very relevant and helpful and will be helpful to have slides. So, and yeah, I sent that in the chat window, but I'll email that to everybody this afternoon. And then we're recording Amelia's presentation, so I'll share that as well, so you can go back to any slides that she has in there.
Excellent.
And we'll leave this poll open just for another minute or two. Right now, it's education is leading slightly, but economic justice and criminal justice reform are right behind for focus areas.
Tim, just let me know when you think I should get going again.
Yeah, we'll give everybody another minute or two to get a glass of water, to take a bio break.
Sounds good.
And if you, I sent everybody the link to the Zoom webinar today, this morning. But if anybody, it's not too late to join. So if you know anybody in your organization or outside that would like to attend right now, we're going to go into a lot more training in the next hour. So feel free to invite anybody in your network that might find this useful. All right, and I think this violated everything that Amelia just said, but education is our top vote getter right now for organizations. And then criminal justice reform and economic justice are right behind. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Amelia. This is great so far. Thank you very much, and feel free to start whenever you'd like.
Okay, let's go ahead and people can trickle in as they become available. Okay, so now we're going to take what we've learned so far and apply it to a familiar challenge using the type of data that you probably already have on hand. So the challenge that we're gonna confront is showing funders, donors, board members, clients, and other stakeholders your reach. So who are you reaching? What communities are you reaching? And as I said, we're going to use data that you probably already have on hand. I call this pantry staple data. It's data that most organizations collect. In this case, we're going to be using demographic data. Okay, and we're going to be using Tableau Public. That's the free version of Tableau. As I mentioned, Tableau has a free version and a paid version. You can subscribe to Tableau on a monthly or annual basis, but you can also use this free version, which is what we're going to use today. Tableau Public has a lot of the same features as the paid version. There are two primary differences. The first is there are fewer ways, fewer possible data connection options with Tableau Public, but you should know that Excel and Google Sheets are among the options for Tableau Public. But if you want to connect it, for example, to Salesforce or some other databases, you need to get the paid version. The other primary difference is that you can't save what you create in Tableau Public to your own desktop or to your own server. You have to save it to Tableau's server. So it's not good for sensitive data. You're not going to want to, for example, put health data on there or any identifying information about individuals. But you should know that you can hide whatever you create on Tableau Public from anyone who doesn't have the URL for that. So it's not like if you hide it, no one can Google and find it. So a lot of my clients use Tableau Public because it's free, and they just use what's called de-identified data. So they don't have any individuals' names in their data set or anything else that would help someone to identify individuals, like their birthday, certainly not their social security number, and that sort of thing. So as long as the data is de-identified and hidden from anyone without the URL, it serves a purpose for a lot of organizations, and they get this great data visualization tool for free. So I'm happy to talk more about Tableau if you have more questions later, and I'll also be talking about resources you can use to learn Tableau. Okay, so we have limited time today, so here's the strategy I'm suggesting. Do not take notes, or of course, don't try to follow along in Tableau. Just watch me do it. Soak it all in as best you can. Then later, try it on your own. I'm providing detailed instructions, really. There's step-by-step instructions with images that you can use to replicate what I do today. I'm also providing the data set that I'm using today. So you can really try this on your own time, at your own pace later. Just watch me do it to get a general sense of Tableau and whether it's something you might be interested in learning. Okay, so before we begin the demonstration, I want to familiarize you with the Tableau worksheet view and its key features. This is the worksheet view, and it's what you'll be looking at most of the time when you're working in Tableau. It's where you build a particular visualization. So it's where you build one chart, one map, or one graph. So let's talk about the different features. To create a new worksheet, you click on this icon in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. This creates a new worksheet tab at the bottom of the screen, which you can name whatever you want. And you'll see this in the demonstration. Once you build a visualization on a worksheet, you can duplicate it if you want a slightly different version, and then alter that version a bit. Several worksheets can be dragged onto a dashboard and use common filters. We'll also see this in the demonstration. You can create a new dashboard by clicking on this icon in the lower left-hand corner of the screen. Looks like a little window. Okay, so now let's talk about the types of data that you have to work with. So depending on the data set you're using, you'll probably have some data fields which are dimensions and some which are measures. So dimensions are those categorical types of variables that we talked about before. Tableau always shows them in the color blue. And so, so it's age groups, zip codes, neighborhood names, that sort of thing. Measures are those continuous numerical variables we talked about, and they're shown in green in Tableau. Also, Tableau automatically creates some measures and dimensions for you. So you're going to see one thing it does is it creates a measure that tells you how many rows you have in your data set. And you'll see this in the demonstration that can be a very useful measure to use in your visualizations. It always names that variable for whatever your data file is named. Tableau will also automatically give you latitude and longitude if you bring in any geographic variables. So if you have a zip code or state in your data set, it will automatically calculate the latitude and longitude, for example, for each zip code. We're going to see that as well. It also creates something called measure names and values that allow you to build certain types of views that involve multiple measures, but we're not going to go into that in this demonstration. Okay, the column, what's called the column shelf, creates the columns of a table, or what we call the x-axis. The rows of a shelf create the rows of a table, or the y-axis. You can drag any number of measures or dimensions onto these shelves, and this will make more sense when you see it in action. When a measure or dimension is dragged onto this filter pane, you can filter the view by that variable. So if you dragged on neighborhood names, you have a dimension called neighborhood, you can use the filter pane to narrow it down to just certain neighborhoods, for example. And if you choose to show the filter, then the viewer can control this. So you make it an interactive visualization where the viewer can show, you know, only certain time periods or certain categories. Okay, so when you drag measures and dimensions to the view, meaning sort of onto those shelves I just talked about, the data are displayed using marks. So marks are encodings, what we talked about before, moving data from words and numbers to some kind of visual form, or what Tableau calls a mark. Marks can be displayed in many different ways, including lines, shapes, bars, maps. Tableau defaults to certain types of marks, depending on the type of data you've dragged into the view, but you can change the mark to your liking. The type of mark you use and the mark properties are controlled by where I'm pointing to here on this slide, which is called the marks card. And we'll see this in action in a moment, in a second too. Okay, and finally, I just wanted to alert you to this Show Me button, which is always in the upper right-hand corner of the Tableau worksheet screen. And the way this works is that whatever measures or dimensions are already in the view or are highlighted on that data pane on the left, if you click the Show Me button, Tableau will suggest some chart types that might work for those measures and dimensions that have been selected. And then if you like one of them, you can click on it and it will automatically create that chart for you. And then you can alter it to better fit your needs. Okay, just real quick, any quick questions before we launch into the demonstration? Tim, just let me know, otherwise I'll just soldier on.
Yeah, we have some questions, but it's more general, so please go ahead.
Okay, good. Let's go on. Oops. So what I want to do, is start getting into Tableau. So first I'm going to show you the dashboard that we are going to be working to create today. Let me go right here. I'm going to put it in full screen mode so you can all see it all right. Okay, so this is what we're going to work on creating today. We're not going to get 100% there, just due to some time concerns. And also, I just want to really focus on giving you a general sense of Tableau without getting into any nitty-gritty issues. But if you follow the directions that I'm providing, this is what you'll arrive at. So what are we looking at here? Let's talk about this map dashboard. So the data is from, I live in Chicago. The data is from the Chicago Micro Lending Institute. I'm sure you have a similar group or many groups in New Orleans. What the Chicago Micro Lending Institute, or CMI, does is they train and develop micro lenders to expand small businesses in Chicago. So the circles you see on the map show the location, specifically the zip code area of small business owners who have received loans through CMI. So just in case you're not familiar with Chicago, this blue area on the right is Lake Michigan. Chicago borders Lake Michigan. And then this is the Chicago area to the left, the different zip code areas. Okay, so again, the circles on the map show the location of small business owners who've received loans. The size of the circles show the number of loans in that zip code area. So where you see larger circles are zip code areas that got more loans. Where you see real tiny circles, those zip codes got fewer loans. And the bar chart on the right shows the number of loans in each type of industry. So one thing that you can do at Tableau is have what they call tooltips. So if you click on or scroll over, excuse me, I just want to scroll over a circle, it will tell you what the zip code is and how many loans specifically there were in that zip code, okay? But there's also a cool, we talked about filtering feature, which is if I clicked on a particular zip code, I'm gonna click on 60647, what happens is not only is that dot highlight, but the bar chart filters to just that zip code. So I'm seeing only the loans in, only the industries in which there were loans in that zip code. If I click again, it unfilters. Similarly, I can use the bar chart to filter the map. So if I just want to see where there have been daycare loans, I could click on daycare here, and then I could see what zip codes got daycare loans, okay? So you can see how this might be really helpful to really any type of organization to show its reach in a certain area. Okay, so that's what we're working towards. How do we get there? I'm gonna click, oops, click off that. And what's happening now? Okay, sorry, I'm gonna get that off my screen. Now it's all stretched. Okay, all right, so let's take a quick look at the data set that we'll be using. Here's my data set. Okay, so you can see it's just a simple spreadsheet. This is publicly available data that I downloaded from the internet, from the Chicago Micro Lending Institute. So each row in this data set represents a separate loan that CMI made. And as you can see in the column headers, if you can read them, for each loan, we get the name of the lender. We get a bunch of information about the location of the loan. We get the street address, city, state, zip. Chicago's divided into wards, just like New Orleans is. So we get the ward number. We get the industry that's related to that loan. And then it actually includes latitude and longitude data as well, although we're not going to use it because we're going to just use the latitude and longitude data that Tableau automatically calculates for us based on the zip code. Okay, so you can see pretty simple data, right? We're going to connect to this data in Tableau. So let's go on over to Tableau. Okay, so in the instructions that I provided to you, it will tell you how to download Tableau Public for free to your computer. So I'm not going to go through that, but once you've downloaded it and opened it, the first thing you're going to want to do is connect to your data, and you're going to see this window when you open it, and you're going to just click Connect to Data here in the upper left-hand corner. And then you just navigate to your data. So mine is a CSV file or comma separated file, also called a text file. So I'm gonna choose a text file here. And then I'm gonna just navigate to where on my computer that text file is, which is right here. And as you can see, what Tableau does first thing is kind of replicate that spreadsheet that it just imported. So we can see all the same columns that we were looking at before when we opened the CSV file in Excel. So the first thing you're going to want to do is see if Tableau recognized the different types of variables that you have in your data set. Or when I say variables, you can just interchange that with data field. You can see Tableau sort of made its best guess at what kind of data each data field is. So for loan date, it guessed that it's a date field because it put this tiny little calendar icon in the column header. So that's correct, loan date is a date. It uses this ABC icon to indicate categorical data, so that again, that's, what color is it? Whatever category it fits in. What neighborhood is it? What age group is it? So it's correctly identified all those location variables or the address variables really as string or categorical variables. It's correctly identified city, state, and zip as geographic variables because it has this little globe icon at the top. Now it was incorrect about ward, right? Because wards are numbers, but they're not numbers that can be added together. They're just numbers instead of names. So ward really isn't a number variable like it's guessed. So I could click on that and change it and say it's really a string variable because it's just a category. And then of course, industry is a category as well. Okay, so now that Tableau has correctly identified all of our data, the next thing we can do is start making that map. And it's much easier than you would think it would be. So the first, to start a new visualization, I always click on sheet number 1 here at the bottom left. I'm going to click on that. And as I mentioned before, you can change the name. So I'm going to double click on sheet number 1 and just call it map because we're going to create the map on this page. Okay, so to create the map, this is almost like magic. All I need to do is double click on a geographic variable. So you can see we have zip code here in the data pane. It's one of my dimensions. All I'm going to do is double click on it and watch what happens. Tableau will take a little while to think, but not too long because you can see already I have a map. And what it's done is put a mark, in this case it's defaulted to a circle mark in blue, for every zip code that I have in my data set. So we already have a map and we haven't really done much work yet. Okay, in the example, remember, the circles weren't all the same size. Circles were larger where there had been more loans and smaller where there had been fewer loans. So what I want to do is tell Tableau to size these circles according to the number of loans. And that's where this field that I talked about that Tableau creates automatically, this number of rows field that that gets named for the name of my data file, which is CMI_microloans. So what Tableau is counting the number of loans within each zip code. And what I can do is say, okay, tell me how many loans are in each zip code. And I do that by dragging that number of records field onto size. Now Tableau, you can see there's a little size legend in the upper right-hand corner, has shown, these tiny dots show where there have been only 1 loan, bigger dots show where there have been 5, 10, up to 12 loans. If I scroll over these, I can also see that information. Okay, so we're getting closer to what we want. And the next thing I want to do is change the map layers. So I'm going to click on this map menu at the top, and then I'm going to choose map layers. And you can see I have a number of different options on this menu on the left. There's different styles I can choose from. It's defaulted to the style called light, but I'm going to choose outdoors instead, and you can see what happens. So it's added what they call layers, so just a lot more information and more color in this outdoors style. But I don't have to include all the information that's included by default with this layer. Really all I want is the streets, highways, and routes. So I'm going to uncheck all these layers that I don't want. You can see they disappear from the map. Okay, and I think that's all I want to do there. So I'm going to close out of my map layers menu by clicking on this X. And then we're going to go to the next step. I'm going to change my map background now. So I'm going to click on this format menu, and you can find a lot of useful options on this format menu. In this case, we're going to go to shading. And I want to change the whole background to my map to that dark blue background that you saw in the example. So I'm going to just click on worksheet here at the top, and you can see when I click on it, I get different color options. If I click more colors, I have even more color options, but I'm going to just choose this blue. So that changes the whole background to my map. Let's see, I think that's all I want to do there. Okay, so I'm going to click off format shading, so I don't have to look at that menu. I'm going to go on to the next step. Now I want to change the color of the circles because of course they're not standing out very much because it's blue on blue here. So again, circles are marks, right? And what controls marks? The marks card. So I want to change the circles. So I'm going, the color of the circle. So I'm going to click on color. I'm going to choose an orange color. You also can change the opacity of the color. So since I have some, see I have some circles that overlap here in downtown Chicago, I'm gonna change it from 100% to like about 88% so that they become somewhat translucent so it's easier to see overlapping circles. I also think I'm gonna give them the border. Okay, so this is looking closer and closer to what I want here. Next, I think I'm good now with this map. So next I'm going to create that bar chart. So again, I'm going to go down and create a new sheet. Remember, you do one sheet per chart. So I'm going to click to make a new sheet and call this one, excuse me, bar chart. Okay, and we're going to create that bar chart which shows number of loans per industry. Okay, so what I'm going to do that is I'm going to start using these columns and rows shelves. And what I'm going to do is first put industry in rows. And you can see it right away, it gives me the name of all the industries in my data set. Now, what I want it to show is how many loans there have been in each industry. Again, the number of records is the same as the number of loans, or the number of rows is the same as the number of loans because each row in my data set represents a different loan. So I'm going to pull that measure and put it on the column shelf. You can see that Tableau automatically defaults to a bar chart, which is actually what I want. So I'm not going to change it. But if I wanted to change it, I could change the mark from right now it's automatically a bar, but I could change it to a square if I wanted to, or a circle. But anyway, I'm going to keep it a bar. And we talked about before about showing order. Well, these are out of order, right? Because we, the industries that had the most loans are right here in the middle. So Tableau has a little icon that you could automatically put your rows in descending order. So I'm going to click on that. So now they're in descending order. And let's see, I'm going to do a few more things just to clean up this chart. So I don't really want to have this x-axis showing with all the numbers on it, because to read the chart, you really have to pick a bar and then your eye has to travel all the way down to the x-axis to know how many loans there were. And even then you're not going to get an exact number. So what I'm going to do is get rid of this x-axis by right-clicking on it and unchecking show header here. And then what I want to do is label each one of these bars so it shows the exact number of loans there were in each industry. Again, the measure that tells me number of loans is this one that Tableau auto generated for me. And I'm going to just pull it onto label. And now I'm going to have a label for each one of my bars, which is much easier to read, right? Okay, so it's getting even better. I also just want to get rid of this little header that says industry here by right-clicking on it and then choosing hide field labels and rows. And then we talked about reducing the data to ink ratio. I just want to get rid of some other distracting visual elements like these grid lines. So to do that, I'm going to go back to that format menu and choose lines. You can see I could look at lines that are on the whole sheet, on rows, or on columns. These are column grid lines, so I'm going to choose columns. I'm going to go down here where it's up here where it says grid lines and just say none. I don't want any of those. But I still have this x-axis line that I want to get rid of. So I'm going to go back to sheet. Actually, Tableau calls these 0 lines. And I go, oh no, I think, no, axis ruler is what it calls it. And I'm going to change that to none to get rid of that. So I just have a cleaner looking chart that way. Okay. If I want to change, I can do all kinds of more things to change the look of this chart if I wanted to. For example, if I wanted to change the font, I could go back to format and choose font. You can see it's defaulted to a certain font and font size and font color, but I could change that however I want. If I wanted that blue color for my font, I could choose a different font. And I could choose a different size. But I'm gonna go back because that doesn't look so great. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I think I would also like to just show you real quick how I put these two charts together on one dashboard. I'm not going to go through all the steps of making it super pretty like the one you saw as the example at the beginning. But again, the instructions tell you how to get all the way to that bar chart. But that dashboard. But I'm going to just give you the basic idea of how you put charts onto a dashboard. So I'm going to click on this little create a new dashboard icon at the bottom here. And when you're creating a dashboard, you always need to be concerned about size first. So you can see it's automatically given a sort of minimum and maximum size, but you can do a fixed sized. So if I click on fixed size, I get a bunch of options here. So like maybe I would choose generic desktop. You really want to design your dashboards for the type of screen that most of your users are going to be using. Okay, so I like that. I'm going to click here. You can see that the two sheets that I created are here at the left. So there's the map. I get a little thumbnail version of it when I scroll over it. And here's the bar chart. I get a thumbnail version of that as well. When I can drag out this map and put it on the dashboard, and it will, as long as I have this tiled button selected at the bottom, it will fill whatever space is available. So let's do that. So you can see it fills the whole space. It also gives me that size legend, which I might not want. So I'm going to click it off. And when I'm going to say delete this container. So now I have the whole map here on my chart, on my dashboard. I might want to get rid of this title. If you right click on it, you can hide the title. And then I want to bring out my bar chart too. So if I click on the bar chart and then chose floating, I can place the bar chart wherever I actually want it. So I could do this. And it, as you know, it doesn't look exactly like what I showed you before. I'm going to get rid of the title here because we haven't gone through all the steps. But this is the basic idea of how you would bring it out on the same dashboard. The other way, I'm going to close it and just show you. The other way, if I clicked on tiled and brought out the bar chart, it would just fill up half of the screen. So you can do it either way, whichever you prefer. And then to have them filter each other, like we saw in the example, all I have to do is click on the map and choose this little filter icon in the upper right-hand corner, and then do the same for the bar chart. Click on the filter icon in the upper right-hand corner. And then when I click on something, for example, retail stores in the bar chart, we're only seeing loans for retail stores on the map on the right. And if I click on just the 60643 area code, we see only the industries that got loans in that area code. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. The rest is kind of just nitty gritty cleaning it up so it looks like the bar chart I showed you in an example, but it gives you a general sense of how Tableau works. And I think it gives you enough information to decide whether you want to go any further with Tableau. All right, so do we have any questions now, Tim, before I move on?
Adrienne wants to know if there's a way to integrate Tableau into a dynamic website.
Oh, yeah, great question, Adrian. So yeah, and actually you need to use Tableau for that. So once you've created your dashboard in Tableau and you've saved it to Tableau server, this is actually in the instructions you'll get. Tableau will give you an embed code for that dashboard, which you can paste into your website. And then the fully interactive data visualization will appear on your website. So that's a great feature. And again, it's completely free. Anything else, Tim?
The only one right now Tableau related is somebody asked, is Tableau your go-to visualization software, or do you use something else day to day?
It's my go-to. I love it. I think those data visualization options that I talked about, those data visualization softwares, they kind of exist on a continuum. So at one end of the spectrum are kind of sort of input, you put some data in and it pops out a chart for you. So you don't really need to know anything to use them, right? It's just kind of an in-out thing. So it's great in terms of the learning curve, but the big downside to those kind of tools are that you can't customize what you're looking at all. Like it will just create the chart, the 5 types of charts it creates, and you can't change it in any way. At the other end of the spectrum are programs like D3, and that's what the New York Times uses. It's kind of like the king or queen of data visualization tools. It's all coding, so the learning curve is almost like directly up. You really need to know a lot in order to code to create the visualizations you want. But once you know how to do that, the sky is absolutely the limit. You can do anything. And if any of you have seen visualizations on the New York Times website, you can see how beautiful and sophisticated their visualizations are. Tableau, so we got that continuum. Tableau, I think, exists somewhere right in the middle of that continuum. So it's highly customizable. Really, there's so much you can do, and you can create very sophisticated visualizations. But it's a drag and drop tool. You don't need to know a bunch of coding. So to me, it's kind of the best of both worlds in that way. And I love Tableau Public. All my clients are nonprofits, so a lot of them choose to go with Tableau Public. They just give me de-identified data and I visualize it for them using Tableau. Tableau markets itself as sort of out of the box, start visualizing the data tomorrow, like that, it's super easy to use. And I think that's the biggest downfall with Tableau, is that I find that to be a misrepresentation, and I've never talked to anyone who's ever used Tableau who agrees with that characterization. It's sure there are some things you can do right out of the box, but there is a pretty steep learning curve. And so, we talked about that time crunch before. You have to decide whether it's worth investing your time or one of your staff members' time in learning it. So it's kind of my market niche. You don't, like you can hire me for a short-term consultation and I'll create some beautiful, very sophisticated data dashboards for you. You don't have to learn any Tableau. I'll teach you enough so you can refresh the data on your own later, and you can use Tableau Public, so there's no ongoing cost to you. But if you have the time and resources, I do think it's a tool worth learning.
Yeah, and I think it was also Adrienne further up in the chat. She was talking about, if there is a need for the regular Tableau license, that it's on TechSoup. It's available for $58 for 2 years.
Oh, that's great to know. And there's also some deep discounts for nonprofits that you should look into.
Yeah, and if you have trouble affording any of those licenses, let PeaceTech Lab know and we can work something out for sure.
Great. Okay, should we go on to the next topic, Tim, or is there anything else?
Please, yeah, there's questions, but they're more general and we can wait till the end for those.
Okay, sounds good. So now I just want to go over some more resources to continue your DataViz journey. So, so this is the training resources that I mentioned before. If there's a lot you can do in Excel and Google Sheets. So those are probably programs that you already know. So if you're comfortable with them and you just want to get more out of those programs to visualize data, you certainly can. This slide is in your resources. If you want to learn how to build some really nice charts using Excel, I recommend the Excel charts video series by Leila Garani. She has some really great videos on YouTube. Similarly with Google Sheets, I like the series called Google Sheets Charts Tutorial by Loves Data. But if you want to go with Tableau, the first place I'd point you to is just Tableau's own website. They have tons of free videos from the very basic stuff to really advanced stuff. And also, if you're going to be, I encourage you before you invest in Tableau in any way to just try out Tableau Public and see if you like it. Also, Tableau Public, there's a Tableau Public gallery online where people have published visualizations that they created with Tableau Public and are sharing them with the world. And I find those to be really great to look at and inspiring. Some of them allow you to download them so you could see how they, kind of reverse engineer and see how they created those visualizations. I also wanted to point you to my own blog called 60-Second Data Tips. So on a weekly basis, or sometimes when I'm really busy, it's not quite weekly, I put out a 60-second data tip. If you go to my website, nonprofitviz.com, you can sign up to receive a data tip in your email each week. It really only takes 60 seconds to read, and sort of a painless way to really up your data game over time with just one tip a week. You can also go to my website and see all the past tips. And if you feel comfortable, feel free to just put your email address in the chat window right now, and I'll sign you up for you. You don't even have to go to my website. Here are some DataViz gurus who I think are great and are worth following if you want to, really up your game. I mentioned Edward Tufte before. You can, they all have their own blogs and websites, and you can follow them on Twitter. The ones I just want to highlight a bit, because they are the ones who most often talk about the type of data that would be of interest to you, either about public resources or nonprofit resources, are Anne Emery. Her organization is called Depict Studio. So you might want to check her out. She uses Excel primarily and has a lot of great tips on Excel, as well as lots of training resources. John Schwabish visualizes government data a lot, and you might want to check him out too, as well as Stephanie Evergreen, who I mentioned before as well. Okay, we got into the bonus round, Tim. So can you put up my bonus round options, and I think we'll have time to do 2 of them. So I'll pick the top 2 ones and cover them.
Absolutely.
And I'm gonna just tell you what your options are here. So I have some slides on how to do a PowerPoint makeover. So data visualizations often end up in PowerPoint presentations, and we've all seen a million really horrible PowerPoint presentations. So I have just 3 tips on how to improve your presentation of data and PowerPoint presentations. Number 2 is how to consume data. So I've spent most of this time talking about how to create data visualizations, but there's also an art to consuming visualizations. Like when you come across a visualization in an annual report or in the newspaper or on a website, how can you really quickly understand what this chart, map, or graph is showing? And finally, my third option is kind of a game show situation. It's called What's Wrong with This Viz? So I'm going to show, if you choose this one, I will show several visualizations that were actually put out into the universe that have some major problems with it. And now that you have know a lot more about data visualization than you did an hour and a half ago. I want to see if you can figure out what's wrong with each one of these charts. So go ahead, choose your top choice, just one, and we'll go with the top 2 topics that get the most votes.
All right, right now we have PowerPoint Makeover in the lead with
Okay.
the other 2 tied. What's wrong with his Viz? Just went up into second place.
Okay.
So it's like a horse race or something.
Okay, so should we start? Okay, cool. Why don't I do PowerPoint Makeover, and then you could tell me if how to consume data moved ahead.
All right.
Yeah, it looks like now you're showing us the results. Yeah, so it looks like PowerPoint Makeover and what's wrong with this Viz. Okay, cool. Okay, so PowerPoint Makeover. So as I mentioned, data visualizations like charts, maps, and graphs often make their debut in a PowerPoint presentation. We already know that PowerPoints are a problem, of course. We've napped through many of them in our careers. Hopefully not this one. And we even know when we are on the creating end that they shouldn't be text heavy, right? But we don't really know what else to do besides type in a few bullet points and paste in some bad clip art. And there's a lot of advice out there on how to improve and make better presentations, but I've whittled it down to just 3 tips that if you follow them, I think you'll dramatically improve your presentations. So my first rule is called slides are for seeing. So, okay, so this is a little test. Think about the last subtitled movie you saw. Did you miss a lot of the action while reading? Research shows we are quite good at simultaneously processing pictures and spoken words. So that's like a movie without subtitles, really easy to watch what's happening on the screen and listen to what they're saying, right? But our brains go on overdrive when processing pictures plus written text, like during subtitled movies. And they can completely shut down, our brains can completely shut down when processing written text plus spoken word, which is what we're often asked to do during presentations. So here's an example. This is sort of a before slide. I'm going to show you the after slide in a moment. So as you can see, there's lots of text on this slide in different bullet points, and one really bad, rather small visualization kind of crammed into the corner. So now look at the slide and listen to me talk about the slide as if we're in some sort of PowerPoint presentation. Okay, here goes. The respondents to the survey were mostly females residing in suburbs, but a large minority lived in urban areas. The large majority were reported to be white, and as you can see, although we had a range of ages, most were in the 40 to 49 bracket, which differed from past surveys, which had more respondents in the 20 to 29 bracket. Okay, I'm done talking. So did you hear everything I said? Or did you absorb all the information on the slide? Probably not, right? You probably experienced something what I call brain cacophony. So that's a term I use to describe that feeling of being overwhelmed and confused by too much information crowding the verbal channels of the brain at once. You didn't know whether to listen to me or to read all the stuff on the slide or to just zone out. Okay, so here's my after slide. It's really just a brief takeaway and a bold image that reflects the takeaway. There's no chart at all on this slide. And it would be much easier to listen to me talk about the survey findings while looking at a slide like this. It just bolsters what I'm saying rather than competes with it. So slides are for seeing. Mostly what you include on the slide should be some kind of visual element that bolsters what you're saying. Okay, number 2 is portion control. The hard truth is that our audience members are going to walk away from our presentation retaining just a few ideas, whether we like it or not. If we shower them with lots of ideas, we don't control which ones they retain. So what you should do is just choose just a few ideas and weed out the rest. Then feature only one idea per slide and go easy on the charts, maps, and graphs. They're really more difficult to process than images. So give your viewers sort of a cognitive break between charts. Don't have a slideshow where it has a different chart on each slide. Okay, and rule number 3 is to obey visual hierarchy. So visual hierarchy is a term used in graphic design to mean the arrangement or presentation of elements in a way that implies importance. So it tells you what to look at first and what to look at second. So here's an example. Simplify your slides with just one compelling image or one chart or map, or graph, which itself has been sort of stripped down to the bare minimum. And make sure there's plenty of white space around the image to give it prominence. Then enlarge only the most important text while reducing the rest of the text. Again, to sort of show this visual hierarchy, the big stuff, the bright stuff is what they're supposed to look at first. Similarly, use color sparingly to draw attention to the most important elements of the slide. So really think about the visual hierarchy when you're doing a PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so those are my 3 suggestions. I am now going to skip through how to consume data. So you can see these slides, but you cannot understand what's going on with them because I'm not going to talk about them. Maybe if we have time, we could do that too. Okay, so here's our game show. What's wrong with this chart? Okay, are you ready for your first chart? And you can type in your answers in the chat window. Okay, here's the first chart. It was on, I got it from the Business Insider, but it was a chart that was shown on Fox back in 2012, if anyone can remember that long ago. And please let me know what you see that is incorrect. And there's stuff that's incorrect, but there are also things that just make it an ineffective chart.
Sarah says it's more than 100, and Libra says pie chart that makes the percentages that look equal.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the more that I just can't believe they actually put this on Fox News because I mean, you guys are getting it right away. Yeah, a pie chart has to equal to 100, right? You can't have 3 slices that equal more than 100. Anything else that you don't like about this chart? For me, again, it's like the color issue. It's a lot of bright, fully saturated color. I don't know what the broadcaster was saying when they were talking about while this chart was showing, but if they were trying to highlight, for example, how well Huckabee was doing and compared to Romney and Palin, they might have wanted just to color in that slice of the pie, assuming that they corrected the pie chart percentages. So that's another thing that I would change. And again, we have the 3D issue going on as well. Okay, great. Let's see, someone else said something.
So Lacey says the colors and names, and Sarah says the back so-and-so is strange for the title GOP candidates.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that as well. Okay, here's another chart. This one might be a little bit harder. What do you think is a problem with this chart? I know it's really abstract. I haven't said what we're looking at, but that's not the issue I'm trying to get at here. But there is a problem you can identify even without knowing what kind of data we're looking at. I'm not seeing anything yet. Oh, here we go.
Libra says the bars are not equal in width.
Oh. I'm not perceiving that. I think they are the same width. So that's not what I'm trying to get at. But that's interesting that that's what you see. Anything else? Oh, here we
Michaela,
go.
oh, sorry, Michaela.
Message.
Can you read those, Amelia?
Yeah, it says 9750 is not double 9450. Right, you know, you're getting at it, Michaela, I'm sorry, I said your name wrong. There's no data labels, right, a color, right. That all of course is true. Maybe be better as a pie chart. I'm not sure because it's with, you know, it's 5 different groups. I think pie charts work best when there's only 2 or maybe 3 groups. Let's see, E is not double A. Okay, Michaela is totally getting at it. What the problem here is, if you look along the y-axis, it doesn't start at 0. It starts at 9100. So Michaela is absolutely right. You can't, you know, you can't do the math here. One bar is not twice as long as another, and that's because we're not starting at 0. So what it does, let me show it to you. When we include the 0, it's making the lengths of the bars look much more different from each other than they actually are. Because when we start the y-axis at 0, we could see the bars are pretty similar in length, right? So we really are exaggerating the differences among groups here by starting it at 9100. And it's a trick some, you know, deceptive data visualizers use if they want to emphasize a difference among groups that doesn't actually exist. Okay, so here's another really great one. Let's see what you think about this one. What's wrong with this chart?
Adrienne says
We
it's
got it.
upside
We got it
down.
right away.
Oh,
You guys
yeah,
are great.
sure, yeah.
Excellent. Well done. You all got it. It is. It's upside down, right? So what looks like an increase is actually a decrease. The 0 is at the top of the y-axis, we're at the bottom. You know, the convention that we all sort of depend on is that numbers ascend upward on a y-axis, not descend. So at first glance, it looks like gun deaths are on the decline in Florida, but at closer look, you see that the y-axis is upside down. And gun deaths actually increase. As gun deaths increase, the line slopes downward. So that's really a huge problem and very deceptive. So you guys are excellent. Let's see what someone else said. I think they just wanted it to look like blood dripping. Yeah, I think that's probably the case, but I think it doesn't really communicate well what the data actually show. And it's pretty deceptive because probably no one's going to spend more than a few seconds on this chart, and they may walk away with the wrong idea. It just backfired, pun intended. Very good, Sarah. So good. I think I have one more chart for you. And you guys may have seen this chart. It became sort of infamous when it first came out. But let me know, what do you think is wrong with it? I should mention it's from the Georgia Department of Public Health, from their website. It certainly is hard to read. I agree with that. Anything else that's a problem with it? Very good, Michaela. Each county bar does change position. That is one of the problems with it. Let's see. Yeah. Hermione got the same thing. Cities are in order considered. Okay, you're all saying the same thing. Anything else that's a problem with it? There's one more thing. The dates, right? Dates are not chronological. Totally ding, ding, ding. You got it. So this is, as I mentioned, has now become kind of infamous. The Georgia Department of Public Health took it down, but what you're looking at now is the original chart. They didn't present the dates along the x-axis in chronological order. Moreover, the bars, which each represent a different county, were presented in different orders on different dates. The result, according to Morgan McFall Johnson at the Business Insider, quote, I love the way he characterized this, quote, seemed to bend both time and place to achieve a clean descending staircase effect. So let's look at what it looked like when they corrected it. So this is what the data actually looks like when you put the dates in chronological order and you order the counties in the same order for each date. You know, it's a much less clear picture, right? So it shows, you know, the variation among counties and dates better. Okay, so Tim, this is up to you. We have 15 more minutes. I don't know if I could get all through the how to consume data slides. Maybe we should just take some questions at this point and then wrap it up.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
go ahead and maybe questions and then give everybody back a few minutes in their day if
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Let's do that.
yeah. So I had one question from Samuel, and some of this I know you've covered already, but he asked, what is the biggest data challenge you see in small nonprofits?
Dirty data, I think. Yeah, so you guys now are aware of that term if you weren't before. You know, like people come to me and they want to visualize their data, but they don't, there's too many problems with their data. And as I mentioned, sometimes visualizing the data is a great way of identifying some of those problems because they're, you know, sometimes they can be hard to see until you put the data in a chart and you're like, that's not right. And you go back to your data and you see, oh, because we've duplicated, you know, these records or whatever. Or some data is not properly coded. So dirty data is a big issue, as well as that disconnection issue too. I visualized some data for a public library, and they had a summer reading program like a lot of public libraries do. And what they did is every summer they started a new spreadsheet and just, you know, listed each kid in the summer reading program and how many books they read. But they had a separate spreadsheet for each summer. And so what they couldn't see in that data until I connected it all for them and visualized them is that they thought the problem they came to me with is that, like, how can we get more kids involved in the summer reading program? But when I connected it all, you could see that most of the kids who were participating were only participating for 1 year and then they were dropping off. They couldn't see that when they were looking at the spreadsheet separately, but when they connected the data, they could see that the big problem, they were gathering a lot of new kids every year. They were just not keeping them for that long. So that can be a big problem with smaller organizations.
More of a comment than a question, but Libra says, thank you for hosting this webinar. It was very informative and well presented.
Thank you, despite my technical issues at the beginning. So frustrated with that, but.
You recovered nicely. All right, any other questions for Amelia? All right, well, thank you very much, Amelia, for the wonderful presentation. I know there was a lot to cover in here for everybody, but you included a ton of lessons and best practices, and I know it was really impactful for a lot of people, and they'll take a lot of good practices out of this. Thank you as well as Derwin and Sarita for taking time out of your busy schedule today to join us. And thanks for everybody for tuning in. As I mentioned, I'll be sending out Amelia's slides and the data set today, and then I'll try to get the presentation up online and share that with everybody as well. And then, as I mentioned earlier in the day, we'll have more upcoming presentations on media and social media strategies and digital security and things like that. In the post-event survey, there'll be a survey after this. Let us know if you're interested in any of that. And